Hello everybody, we're just getting ourselves set up and people are just rolling in now, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes for people to join. Hi Malcolm, hi Jackie. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, Candice from the Philippines. Good morning to Margarita from DC. Anna, hi. Yvonne, hello. Amy, hello. Oh, this is so exciting. So I was going to ask you to do this in a few minutes, but why don't we do this while people are just rolling in? Tell me where you're coming from. Texas, hello. Texas, Russia, I missed who that was. The Vanya High from Canada. Quebec. Oh, it's going so fast now. Atlanta. James, can you see them?
Yeah.
Colorado, Canada, France, Sydney, Australia. Hello, hello, hello. Cleveland, South Africa, USA, Texas, Dublin. Good morning from New Zealand. Argentina. Awesome. Midnight here. I'm not sure who that is. Somebody's up in the middle of the night. Thank you. Texas. Lots from Texas. Kentucky, Canada, USA. All right, have you fixed it? No, still not changed. Grand. Okay, just leave it. I'm just going to close this. Oh, hi Carol, I can see you. Can you see me? No, I can't see any of you. I can just see myself and my husband, who I will just introduce in a second. Not able to see the others. No, you can't see the other participants. This is a webinar setting, not a Zoom setting. You won't be able to see each other. So I'll just explain that because a few people are asking about that. Okay, I'm just going to close the chat for now. I'm closing the chat. So too. Okay. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. Let me just. I can't. The chat keeps opening again. Let me just explain who I am and what we're doing here. My name is Cara Palmer. I am an AMI Montessori teacher in New Zealand. I teach 9 to 12, although I have quite strong connections with the 6 to 9 and 3 to 6 classes in our school. I have a blog at montessorihandwork.com. And I wrote the Work of Wool, a Montessori handwork album, because I thought there was a gap in our albums and there wasn't enough guidance for people that wanted to do handwork but didn't really know how to do it. And so I created what's hopefully the first of 3 or 4 handwork albums, and this one's focused on wool. It's called the Work of Wool. I'm just going to show it to you. I'm sitting in front of my handwork shelf. I'll show you that in a minute. So this is the Work of Wool. It's got all the lessons that I've got, all the wool lessons I've got materials from on the shelf. Lots of stories, lots of curriculum links, lots of history. I'm not actually here to sell this to you. I just wanted to tell you about it so that if you do want the lessons for the materials I'm going to talk about, you know where to get them. You can get it through my website, montessorihandwork.com. And I'm going to give you a discount voucher later on as well if you want to get it today. If you don't, all good. Enjoy the webinar. Thank you for coming. I was going to start by asking where everyone's coming from, but it's flying into the chat at the moment. Have you got any more interesting ones, James? Oh, so I'm here with my husband, James. He's the picture of the orchard that was supposed to be a picture of the shelf. And he's just helping me to read out the comments so that I can talk and he can do the comments. So if you have any questions as we go along, just fire them away into the comments. I won't, sorry?
All the question and answers.
Do you want that as well? Yeah, or the question and answers box, whichever box is easiest for you. Hi, Mamie. And you can, and he will read them out to me as we go, so that you don't need to feel like you're interrupting. But I'm just going to talk. It's just going to be kind of casual. You can add what you want, and if you want to tell me to slow down, I know it's not English isn't everyone's first language, and I do talk quite fast, especially when I'm excited. So, or if you didn't quite see something and want me to show it again, just throw it into the chat and James will give me a shout, and you know, you can kind of guide this a bit. my intention is to talk a little bit about the prepared physical environment for handwork, the cultural environment, preparing the cultural environment, and preparing the adults. And the reason I started here is because on Facebook we got talking about webinars, because I can't do any physical workshops at the moment, and I asked in the Montessori Handwork Threads Facebook group what would people like to know about, and it seemed like there was a whole range of things people would like to know. And so I thought, well, we'll start at the beginning, we'll start with the basics, preparing ourselves, and then I don't know, maybe there'll be more webinars from here. We'll just see how we go today. So let's actually put out a poll. I've written a little poll. I hope it's going to pop up on your screens. I'd really like to know what your age and area of interest is, just so that I know who I'm talking to. So I'm going to flick a poll up onto your screens now. Can you just tick, you can tick as many as you want, I think, which age group are you working with or interested in? Oh, it's going, they're all flying in. And if it's something else, just throw it in the chat if it's something else completely, or a group that I've missed out. So I don't know if participants can see the poll. Can you just,
I can see the poll.
Yeah, but you're a panelist. Can you just tell James in the chat if you can see the poll, please? Otherwise I'll read out the results. No, I've got lots of no. I've got some yes and some no. I mean the results. Can you guys see the results? No, you can't see the results. Okay, so it looks like most people have put it in now. So there's a really nice curved graph. It's mostly 6 to 9, some 9 to 12, and quite a lot of, 29% is 6 to 12. That's lovely. A few 0 to 3s, a few 12 to 15s, and a few others, 2 others. Nice, cool. Thank you for that. All right, so I'm blocking the view of my shelf, but I'll move along and show you. I set my shelf up like it's quite close to how it normally is, but I've added some things just to show you guys, and given it a bit of dust and a tidy. So the handwork shelf, I find, along with the art supply shelf, is the hardest one to keep tidy in the classroom. And I think the reason for that is it's so fluid. And the math shelf is the easiest one to keep tidy because the children know they take the stamp game off, they use the material, they put it exactly back in the slots on the box, and they put it exactly back where they got it from, and it looks the same every time. There's the same colours of tiles and the same pieces. Whereas the handwork shelf, apart from the fact that the actual work changes periodically, the basket that has the balls of wool in is a different colour every time they pick it up. And there's different bits of material, and so it's never going to be exactly the same, and it's one that people get a bit excited about, and people work together and pass it on from one to the next without putting it away in between sometimes. So it is a bit of a labor of love keeping it tidy, and I am going to give you some tips I've come across to try and help keep it tidy. If you've got others, I would love to hear them. Do feel free to bang them in the chat. James will read them out to me. And the other thing I want to say is I talk like this is the way to do it. This is my way of doing things. There are, especially with handwork, there are so many ways to do things. So don't take what I'm saying as gospel. They're just suggestions. And if you've got other ways, I'd very much like to hear them. Okay, do you want to say anything before I?
No, not at the moment.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to start at the top of my shelf. I'll just bring some things down. Then you can see them a bit better. Okay. So knitting needles. Just state the obvious, you need to have knitting needles, but some of you know that I'm really keen to have children make their own tools before they start. And I am. That's really important. It's great for them to make their own knitting needles. There's all sorts of reasons for that, but I'm worried that if I go into all my reasons for everything, we're not going to get to the end. But I do have knitting needles on the shelf because it takes a long time to make a pair of knitting needles, and I don't think it's reasonable for children to have to make one of every single size for every project they want to do. So I have a lot of knitting needles on the shelf. Now I know some people just have a few, and then they give the children those long stitch holder needles, and they get them to take off their knitting and then put it back on when they want to knit again. To me, that seems really rough, that going through just one row of stitches on a needle is such a lot of effort to a child to have to transfer your stitches onto another pin or needle to go and put it in your handwork bag or your cubby before you come back and have to put it back on the knitting needles before you can even start knitting again, when they already drop stitches and twist stitches and get confused. I think it's too hard for them to do unless they're super good knitters, in which case they bring in their own knitting needles anyway, and a lot of them will do that. So I would rather have lots of knitting needles in the class and have them feel that they can do their knitting without that additional challenge. But you know, that works for some people. Likewise, I have crochet hooks. I do get the children to make their own crochet hooks. In a 9 to 12 class, it's quite a tricky thing to do. So if you want to get them to crochet when they're younger, or you're not that comfortable getting them to carve with knives, then I would have plenty of crochet hooks of all different sizes. And so I've got a size gauge here for the knitting needles and the crochet hooks. The other little thing that I have on the shelf here, these are spinning wheel hooks, and I have a spinning wheel that obviously doesn't fit on my handwork shelf, but the children love it. They do a lot of spinning. I have a few spinning wheels that kick around the class and around school, and they go all the time. Yeah, lots. So this is my jar of spindles. I have a ton of spindles. And again, the children can make their own spindles, but it's really hard to get well-balanced ones that don't fall apart, that are the right weight for the kind of wool you're going to be spinning. And so I start them off using a pre-made spindle, a commercially made one that's balanced, and then we explore how else we could make it. Again, depending on their age. Older children, I might get them to make their own, but younger ones, I would definitely use spindles that have been bought, and have a few top whirl ones, a few bottom whirl ones. You just need to find, when you're storing them, something that will protect their hooks. See, all of mine have got their hooks up, even though some are top whirl and bottom whirl spindles. So this is my niddy noddy. This is for winding the wool when you've finished it. The good thing about this one is if I choose to store it actually on the shelf, I can slide the pieces, I can't, slide the pieces out and put it on the shelf. Let's go the other way. And so it takes up less space, but these are quite bulky and they're very hard to store, so you have to kind of figure a way of storing these. And then I've got a basket of bobbins for the spinning wheel. Now you'll notice they've got lots of yarn on them. Our rule for bobbins and spindles, if you are spinning onto a bobbin or a spindle and you want to keep that yarn for your own project or for yourself, often they just want to keep the yarn, not necessarily for a project. If you want to keep that yarn, then you put that spindle in your project bag, and that is your handwork for the time that you have it. If you're really not bothered about the material that you make of the yarn, then you can just spin for a bit. Like often children will pick it up if it's community meeting or something and they haven't got any handwork on the go. They'll just pick up a spindle so they've got something to do while we're talking. Then they put it back on the shelf, and then anybody can add to it, anybody can finish it off, and anybody can use that yarn.
The name of the device here again, please?
This one? This is a niddy noddy, because it nods when you're winding onto it. It goes like this, and it nods, and there's a rhyme as you wind that they count. Niddy noddy, 2 heads, 1 body. 'Tis one, tain't one, till be one soon. So that was how they used to measure how much yarn they had. We just wind it on. Done that. Books, so I changed the books about a bit that are on the shelf, but I like to have at least 1 book of every handwork that's on the shelf. So if we're into embroidery or felting or weaving, there should be at least 1 book that can extend the children further in that craft. And then we've got to the end. We'll talk about looms afterwards. Okay, so on this top shelf here, this is mostly example stuff for the children. So for knitting, one of the parents in my class did this. You don't have to do this yourself. One of the parents in my class, rhymes and songs. Oh, you can read this. Someone knitted a whole load of squares and they labeled them up with the stitches that they did. So if the children are thinking of creating their own pattern, or they want to see what a type of stitch looks like, they can come and have a look at these, and then they can go, wow, that's really cool with the lace in there. I'd like to be able to knit that, and it says what kind of stitch it is here. And what we did with these ones was we did the same number of stitches for every different pattern, so that they could see the difference in size. But then somebody gave me these ones. A lovely lady in Australia made these ones, and she did the same size square. So it's a different number of stitches, and they're labeled as well. So I've got those for knit and crochet on the shelf for the children to have a look at. This is a box with all the different fibres. These are little flax kettes. They're a New Zealand native craft, the little bags that they're made of. And I've just got samples of the different fibres. These are, I don't know if you can really see the details of it. This is completely raw wool. It's still got the muck on it. And you can choose whether you want it to be clean or raw wool. It's quite nice to have it smelling like the creature it came from. And then in each one I've got a picture of the creature and a little bit of a description of that creature that it came from. You can get these just by going to any kind of fibre fest or your local fibercraft guild, or talking to anyone in your community that's even vaguely interested in spinning, and they will gladly give you bits of their fibres, and they'll have collections, especially if they've been doing it a while, that have had collections they've been forming for years as cotton. They've been forming for years, and they will happily just pull off a little bit of their alpaca and their camel and all their special fibres if they know it's for a school and the children are going to be feeling them and putting them under microscopes and comparing the properties. It's really easy to build a collection once you start to find the right people. Questions?
We have a question. Is Carol on the top shelf or the second shelf?
Oh, right now? It actually goes all the way down. So I was on the top of the shelf here. And then I've gone to the first one, but there's another shelf below and I can't get it all in the picture. So the basket that I just showed, that was fibre samples. That was this one, samples of different fibres.
What was that basket again?
I think that's what I just said. That was the fibre samples.
Oh, you did, yes.
Yeah. And so next to it here, I have the laminated pictures with all the stories and everything that I introduce. So they're from all the stories and the lessons in my book, so that when I tell them, they're just there and ready to use. Show us one. This is weaving. So this is some guys setting up the warp for a loom, and there's a lady working a backstrap loom. So that's all the weaving pictures there. Okay, so I've got these little things. These aren't actually from my shelf. I borrowed these from a 6 to 9 class to show you. They're French knitters and they have all sorts of different names, knitting dollies, and you put the yarn around them and you use a crochet hook or your fingers to lift the loops over, and then it comes out here in a cord. And the reason I like these is because they get children off that eternal finger knitting where they just go through tons of yarn because they want to use their hands to do something but they don't really know what else to do, and so this kind of just gets them moving a little bit further. In a 9 to 12 class and 6 to 9 actually, I'd introduce them to crochet to stop that, because it's the same kind of mechanism but they need to do something productive with it. But these are quite good as well. These particular ones, they're a little bit hard because they're just nails. You can make these, you can make them with those old wooden cotton reels, but you can buy ones in the shops where the hook's kind of looped. It's a metal loop and it's a lot easier for them to get the yarn and pull it over. Looms. So this, it doesn't matter if you can't read it, it's just literally a piece of MDF, so cheap wood with nails hammered in, and you thread it diagonally, and it's a little loom that makes squares. And I just put this on to remind, this often lives in someone's project bag, which I'll talk about those in a bit. Yeah. So yeah, it often lives in someone's bag, and I've only got one of these, and I keep meaning to make more with the children because they're really cool and they'll be excited if they make their own. I just got it at a wool fair. And they just love the process of the diagonal weaving. It's on the bias, so it's a bit different to ordinary weaving, and it goes really, really quickly. And the last person that was really into this, a boy last term, he just wanted to make square after square. He didn't care what happened to them. He just loved the process of it. And so he would sit and make them, and then he'd take them off and he'd hand them to the girl next to him who really liked the squares. And she sewed them all together and she got the blanket out of it. So she was happy because she wanted an outcome, and he was happy because he enjoyed the process. But I have lots of looms. and they come and go. We make them out of cardboard, we make them out of sticks. We get into them. There's a 4-shaft loom that we were given there. There's a whole story behind that, but I'm conscious there's so much to say in so little time. And there's another loom there. This is my handwork area. Look, that's a TV that's just covered up because we only use it for presentations. There's a listening corner and a sofa, so that's all the wires for today. So children can just sit and chill out. We have bean bags in this area too, so that they can read and do handwork down here and listen to music. So yeah, lots of looms. If you understand the 4-shaft looms and such, by all means have them, but then you don't need to hear anything from me. And yeah, if you don't, then it's worth just exploring making cardboard looms. They're very simple and they're very cool.
Just as a quick point, people are saying they can't hear when you're moving the camera. You must have your finger over there.
Oh, over the yeah, over the camera. Sorry, over the microphone. So because we make our tools, we have the equipment to make tools in a basket here. I've got the cutting tools, the saw, I keep that separately in my cupboard, children have to ask for it, and the dowel that we make the knitting needles out of. I keep that separately because I buy it in really long sticks, and you can imagine how much fun those long sticks are if I just leave them out in the classroom. So they come and ask me for the dowel, but they can make knitting needles, knitting needles, that's a homemade one all on its own. Crochet hooks, this one's just from a stick. This one's from a piece of dowel, just hand carved. So then there's sandpaper, hooks and washers for making spindles, glue to put your beads or your stoppers onto your crochet hooks, knitting needles, and polish, and a little treasure box with beads and bits and pieces to put on the end. Down under my loom is a basket of raw wool. Now we're super lucky in New Zealand that we have just tons of wool, like it's everywhere. It appears on my deck in baskets sometimes, or people phone me up and say, I've got this whole fleece, do you want it? Or if we want to shear a sheep, I can just say to the children, who's got a sheep that we can shear? And by the next week, somebody will bring one in and we can shear it at school, and then we can process it. So we have heaps of wool. In fact, on our camp next year, our plan is to shear a sheep on the first day and then process the whole thing into a garment but between us by the end of the week is one of our activities. So wool is everywhere. We have lots of it. So we go through phases where we get a fleece and we all work together to wash one. So this is raw wool just to show you, but I don't actually have it on my handwork shelf because it's in my cupboard in just masses of it. But when it's been washed, then we leave piles of it in the laundry basket by the handwork shelf so the children can card it. So I have to have the carders on the shelf. And these are big brushes that we comb and comb and comb the yarn, the wool, until it becomes all fluffy and light and we're ready to spin it. And if we decide we don't want to card it, then we use this little flip carder just to get knots out, and then you get a very bumpy, lumpy, different kind of yarn when you spin it. So I also buy ready carded wool. This is wool that's been sheared, picked over and washed, and then it comes in this stuff called slither or roving. I think slither is more of an American term. Roving is more of a New Zealand term, but I think they're interchangeable. You can get it combed or carded. Don't pay extra for combed. There's no need. And when you're getting roving to spin, you can get pretty much anything. The children will know the varieties of wool because you've shown them all the different samples. They'll understand that some have long hairs and some have short hairs. The short haired ones are harder to spin. So go for something longer than merino. Basically, merino is the most expensive wool. It's beautiful, it's very soft, it feels like taming clouds, but it is harder to spin and it's expensive, so there's no need. Really, if you're not sure when you're sourcing your roving, talk to your supplier and tell them it's for children learning for the first time, and if they can't tell you whether it's suitable for them, then don't buy it from them because they really should know. And the same with spindles. When you're looking for spindles to buy, you need to say to the maker, the supplier, you know, are these suitable for beginner children to learn to spin on? And again, if they can't tell you that, then they're not the right supplier for you. This is just basic, oh, I'm rolling from the wrong end, basic New Zealand bog standard Romney. And I get them to learn to spin in natural colours. So I put out a variety of greys and browns and fawns, because we haven't talked about dyeing yet. When we've introduced spinning right at the start, we haven't talked about changing the colour. And so, you know, and white as well, but I get them to work just in natural colours to begin with, and then they can move into whatever colours they like. So I'm moving down to the bottom shelf now, which means I guess I need to hop off my stool. Does that work? Okay. So not such a beautiful basket for this one, because this is our wet felting. So in here I have everything that I would need for wet felting. So I've got bubble wrap. Everyone brings me bubble wrap. I find boxes of this on my deck as well. Jackie. And bit of netting. Now you just need mesh to felt through. This is a net curtain. You get them from second-hand shops and just cut up net curtains. Don't buy expensive netting for this. Sometimes they have all those flowery patterns on. That's fine. I have a bar of soap to grate, and a sponge to soak, a little grater, and there's a sponge to soak up the water, and a tub to keep it in, and then sushi rolling mats. And then they'll need to get towels, so they get those from the art area. They get the kind of old grotty towels from the art area, and that's pretty much all you need, as well as the wool. But there's a whole, I'd have to talk about separately, there's a whole protocol around wet and dry wool, so I don't put the wool for felting in the art area. I'm really conscious of that time. This is for needle felting. So the children can use the same wool for wet felting, it's the same stuff. So I just put a few colours of wool for needle felting, and these sponges. Now you can buy the sponges from craft shops, but look what happens to them. The children are digging needles into them constantly, and they come apart and they get big holes in them. And you go through quite a lot of them, and they're really expensive. But this is the stuff that upholsterers throw away. So if you go to an upholstery shop and you ask for their offcuts, they will be glad not to have to pay to dispose of this stuff, and they will give it to you by the bag. I never buy this stuff. We have an upholsterer in our community who brings me bags of it every now and again. Felting needles come in different sizes. And sometimes you're lucky and they're coloured on the top. Other times you can see there's some that are coloured and some that aren't. That's to mark the different sizes. If you're putting them in the classroom, it's hard for the children to just look at them and tell the sizes, and it does make a difference. The coarse ones are for starting off, but they make big holes, and the fine ones are for adding detail, but very slow. So you want to get it in the right order. So you just get some nail varnish, and you choose the colours, even maybe make a card so they can see, and you dip the ends into the nail varnish, stick it into your sponge, let them dry, and then they can tell which are which. Now, this is a good one to demonstrate a little keeping tidy trick. So when I give a lesson with something like this, the first time I give the lesson, we start by coming and taking the material from the shelf, but we admire all of the material before we start. We feel the soft wool, and we look at the sponge, and we look how it's starting to get a few holes in it, and we look at the colours of the labels, take everything out of the, we take everything out of the box, and then out of the basket, and then we put it all back in again, and we say, doesn't it look lovely? Didn't we feel happy when we took it off the shelf? Isn't that how we want to find it when we come back to the shelf? And we all agree, yes, that's really how we want to find it. But then we get all excited and we do our needle felting and we pack it away, or we show a friend and we leave it with them and we look at it and we go, that's not, it's not how it looked when we took it off the shelf. So then I'll go to the child that was working with it and I'll say, hey, were you doing the needle felting? Yeah. Who gave you that lesson? Oh, Sarah did. Cool. Let's go and find Sarah and she can give you the lesson on putting it away again. And then she has to repeat how she knows to put it away. The child gets to hear it again. Sometimes it's me. Oh, I need to give you a reminder of how to put it away again. And if you kind of keep on top of it and make sure that's part of the culture of the craft, then hopefully it keeps a little bit tidy. It's hard with needle felting because you're pulling little bits off. And so you need to show them to pull off just the bit that they need. But it's hard to judge what they need. So if someone asks to see felting needles again, I'm kind of glossing over this stuff a bit. I don't really want to explain what everything is because we're halfway through already and I'm still only halfway through the shelf and I want to talk about culture and adults. Maybe I need to spread these out a bit more next time. So this is a felting needle. You can see where I'm holding it is a bit thicker and then it gets thinner. It's got these little barbs on it. I don't know how clearly you can see. When you stick it into the wool, it mixes the wool up, and that's what makes it into felt. You need to warn the children, these are designed to mess up the fibers they go into. That is their sole purpose in life, which means they will mess up your fingers like they've messed up the sponges. So you need to be really careful with these.
The webinar will be available recorded?
Yeah, so if you miss, I'm recording this right now. I am, aren't I? Yes, I'm recording this, so it's going to go on my website. So I know I'm talking really fast. I'm just a bit anxious that I said I covered so much, and I'm worried I'm not going to get it all in. But it's recorded, so if you miss something, you can just go back and watch it again. Or send me more questions of things you want expanded in maybe future webinars. All of this is in my book.
Felting needles, do you use finger protection?
You can sew little leather ones. The children can use a leather needle and thread and make little covers. And you can also use a card template. People use cookie cutters, but I don't like the metal. But I wouldn't, with the really young children, I'd use cookie cutters. Or you can make a card template, which is how I start with them. And that keeps your fingers well out of the way. But they only do it once. And then they learn to take care. And I've never had anyone actually get upset about the fact that they stabbed their finger and made it bleed. They just kind of learn and go, oh yeah, you were right, it does hurt and it is bleeding, and carry on. So, you know. I think you probably all got these on your shelf. They probably don't need a lot of explanation apart from how to manage them. And there are lots of different ways. Some classes I know only put out enough for one ball per child per day, and they have a monitor to look after it. I don't have much of this out on my shelf because if I'm teaching someone to knit, they use these little balls of wool and then they unravel it and put it back, and then they do it again. And then if they're starting a project, these really aren't enough, or they are for those little weaving squares. But they usually come to me and say, I want to make, you know, these patchworks or a square to sew together in a blanket for this charity drive we're doing, and then we'll choose the colour that they want. So generally for projects we negotiate it and we go to the massive buckets of yarn. I have never bought yarn for the school. We have tons of the stuff, and I have a couple of children that kind of have made themselves carers of that, so they give it out to those who need it.
Does your book have detailed sequential write-ups on how to present the lessons?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, everything I've said on here. So the wet felting, the needle felting, knitting, how to make the knitting needles, how to make crochet hooks, spindles, all lessons to go with all of these, and lots of stories. Yeah, it's all in there. It's all about wool. So we're about to move on to more of the sewing stuff, and I haven't published that book yet. I am working on it, but it's going to be a while. Okay, let's go back up the top of this side. So I said I have books up there, but you'll notice there are some books on, these are iPad stands. They're really good because they're really sturdy, and they're cheap bamboo ones. So the first book I've got here is just details of the latest charity drive that we're interested in. I try and keep something that the children can knit for other than, or sew, or whatever, make for, that's knitting, other than themselves. And I like that to be facing out because otherwise it just gets lost in amongst the other books, as does this is whittling. So I've got 2 books on whittling. There's a knife on there now. I just put that on for today. I don't actually leave the knife on the shelf. I ask the children come and ask me. And when they come and ask me, then they have to read me the knife safety rules. These are on my website. I did a blog post on knife safety rules, so you can just copy them off there. But I get them to tell me the rules. And the last rule is to return the knife to an adult as soon as they've finished. These are my favourite knives, Opinel. And the reason I like them is because they've got no other blades. So don't start playing with corkscrews or any of the other bits of scissors and stuff. It's just simply a knife. And it's got a lock, so you have to twist it to take the blade out, but you also have to twist it and lock it to keep the blade stable, so they can't accidentally cut their fingers when they're holding it here. They won't close it onto their fingers by hitting it the other way. So that's why I like those ones. I get the smaller size with a lock. I would really like them to make a slightly smaller size, but they don't. So this is the smallest one I could get with the lock on it. I'll just do this quickly. Te mahi kete, that's our local New Zealand native Maori craft. So I just put the book out again so it doesn't get lost in amongst the other books and children remember to do it. And these binder clips are what they use to hold it together. I don't leave these on the shelf either because they disappear. So they just come and ask me for some when they want to do this, because otherwise they just go all the time and you find yourself buying them a lot. But I just put them out today. Okay. This, I know a lot of people struggle with this, so I put it to show you, but it's a work in progress. I haven't tested it yet, so I can't tell you whether this definitely works. But this is how I'm now storing my embroidery thread after lots of ways of trying it out and it getting in a mess. So these just click off. And there's several layers, but they're all the same. And I've sorted it by rainbow. And when the children start a new thread, they have to wind it onto one of these. And then there's a little tool at the bottom that winds it on that you can get into craft shops. So they're like doing that, turning the handle and winding it onto the thread. And then I try and keep them in rainbow order and keep it looking nice. But really, this is a constant tidy thing. This is this how we wanted to find it? Who gave you the lesson on how to put them away? Let's go back and see them and see if they can help you sort it out. And giving the responsibility to whoever showed them how to do it, so that they're pretty invested in making sure that that happens. Somebody asked if I use embroidery hoops. Yes, I definitely do. It's really hard to do embroidery if you don't have the hoops, but I do put them back on the shelf when they're not using them. They don't leave them on their work all the time because I only have a few and they do tend to disappear. So I've got calico, pre-cut, embroidery hoops, different sizes depending on what they want to do. And then there's a book on embroidery stitches, but I have this card. You can make your own and laminate stitches from the books or whatever, but this just has the basic stitches really simply to show them what to do so the children can have a look and pick things from there. This I planned to put on my shelf sometime this week. We've literally just got back this week from our COVID shutdown. We've had 1 week back at school. So I was thinking, oh, I'd like to start this hexagonal paper piecing. It seems to be going around the internet at the moment. I was like, that would be a fun thing for the children to do. I've introduced it before and it's been taken up, but not really much. This week it's gone nuts. It's gone like everybody's doing it. And so not just this little basket of stuff is being used. Just so you don't think my handwork shelf is all this beautiful stuff there. This is our basket of fabric that we are using for Pokemon cards. Look. This is our basket of fabric that we are using for our English paper piecing, because if I was restocking that basket, I'd be doing it every 10 minutes at the moment. So you got to go with what works. I'm just going to gloss over this really quickly. This is, Sarah, are you here? Can you say if you are? This is a student teacher that came over from China and she did her observations here and she loved all the handwork. Has she said, has she popped up now?
No.
The paper piecing is, it's English paper piecing. We're doing hexagonal ones. If you Google it, you'll see heaps of stuff about it. So this is Tamari, I think. And so Sarika came over and observed and she loved all of our handwork and she went away and it's obviously in her mind a lot. Then when she came back to do her student teacher placement, she decided that she was going to teach us something. So she taught herself that she'd never done it before, but she made herself an expert in the time she was away and brought us all this stuff. She brought a Chinese language book, but I happen to have an English language book as well that I just hadn't got around to bringing out yet. But the reason I want to show you is it makes these incredible balls that have so much geometry and geography in them. It's just such a cool thing to do in a Montessori environment because you have to think about it being spherical, but then you have to think in terms of hemispheres and latitudes and longitudes as you're putting all your patterns on. So it's a really cool thing if you can get into doing that. It's actually done its dash in our class at the moment. I'm going to take it off the shelf for a while and put it back.
A few people just asked you to qualify the name. Yeah.
I don't want to try and pronounce it. Tamari, is it? I don't know. Okay, I think this might be the moment you've all been waiting for. Tell me in the chat how your sewing box looks inside when you open your sewing box. What can you see? Have you got any answers? No one's daring to say. This is something people say a lot, is keeping their sewing box tidy is a problem. If you've come here for an answer to that, then I'm really sorry to have wasted your time, because I haven't got the solution. I've got some ideas. I've been thinking about it since people talking about it, and since us sewing a lot this week and it getting in a mess. One of my ideas is I think I'm going to get rid of this great big box, and I'm going to do individual sewing kits with white thread only. So everybody gets a roll of thread and a needle and some scissors, and they take that one so it doesn't get in a mess. I don't know, maybe you want to try that. I'm going to open it. This was the one thing yesterday I did not reset and make sure it was perfectly tidy. This is from the kids using it all week. Okay, so it's got threads, scissors, needles. So the stuff in there that we need. The threads aren't too tangled, and the needles and the pins are in the pin cushion. It's got the unpicker. In the bottom here, it's got our pinking shears. I don't want to tip it too far. It's got our pinking shears, some more threads, and a pin cushion. They've sewn some of the hexagons together and made their own little pin cushion look. There's another one. Oh, some of the hexagons they're using are in here too. So it's not terrible. We do tidy it a lot, and we do have a few children in the class that every community meeting bring the sewing box to community meeting and say, we have noticed that people are not putting things away.
Carol, how many students are in your classroom? I'm thinking about how many individual kits that might be.
Oh, yeah, but you wouldn't all be sewing at once. It would be like every other material. If it's available, you use it, and if it's not, it's not. And generally, people don't pick up the same handwork at the same time. Like, I don't get these crazes nearly as often. So I'll answer that question. I'll come back to the crazes. So I've got 28, and actually I'm pleased to talk about this because I've got 28 in my class, and I got an assistant for the first time last term. And the reason that's significant is because I know a lot of people think they haven't got time for handwork, or they haven't got enough hands for handwork, but you really, really have. And that's kind of why I'm rushing, because I really want to finish on time, but I want to talk about culture and how to get it going so it helps your culture and saves you time rather than taking up your time, because I have been doing all of this, as I say, with 28 children and just me for a long time. What was the bit that I was about to say that I said I'd come back to? I just said I'll come back to that in a second. Before I said how many children have done. Oh, the crazes. So the reason that this paper piecing has really picked up is because we've been on lockdown and been away for 8 weeks. And the first week back, the children had just run out of handwork. And so this is something I'll talk about in terms of culture and educating your parents, preparing your adults, preparing the parents for the children that binge on handwork and they worry that all they're doing is handwork. They're doing it because they really need to, and because this was the new thing in the excitement and they hadn't had their hands on new creative stuff for a long time, then it wouldn't actually have mattered what I brought out this week. They just all had to get into it and had to start crafting and creating and chatting and rebuilding their social connections. And that's why it's gone nuts in the class this week. But I wouldn't expect to have that many children hand sewing while other children, because other children will be spinning and somebody else will be on the spinning wheel, which isn't actually here. Someone took it home over lockdown and I haven't got it back yet. So yeah, I don't know. I'll try out the individual kit thing and I'll let you know. I think that is the end of my shelf. I'm just going to talk about a few things that aren't on the shelf. Maybe there's a list. So obviously there is tons more stuff that we could have on there, and I do rotate. As I said, I'm going to take those balls off and put something else out, but I won't at the moment because I don't want to interrupt this paper piecing thing. So clay lives down in my messier area. All my fabric, bigger bits of fabric and yarn live somewhere else. Dye stuffs, we do a lot of dyeing, again in phases, but that's messy and involved and takes the right weather and the right mood from me and the children, and so that's not out all of the time. Tools like saws, hammers and drills, they live in our shed outside. The spinning wheel isn't here but lives to one side, and then we have bookbinding materials down on our art shelf. quilling charcoal down the art shelf, the glue guns there too, and paper making is a sometimes thing. So there's lots more things that could be on there. Okay, oh crikey, let's go to preparing the adult, preparing yourselves. So you need to prepare yourselves, and you also need to prepare your assistant and your parents of your class. So we'll talk about you to begin with. Hopefully, can you tell me roughly how confident, like either you're here because you love handwork, or you're here because you're really not very confident in teaching handwork and you need more help with it? So where on the scale are you? Are you like 1, oh no, I know I've got to do it, but I really don't want to? Or are you like 10, this is my favorite thing and that's why I stayed up at midnight to watch this? What am I getting?
You're getting a mixture. You're getting some people saying they're new to it, some people they love it, some people saying 7, both.
No.
Oh, it's gone mad.
Okay, so we've got a big mixture. So we'll just keep going. So if you are not a hand worker but you want to be, you need to find some way that you can a little bit. You don't have to know everything, but you do need to get yourself some confidence in some things. And the reason for that is, imagine you were learning maths and your maths teacher kept forgetting the numbers or getting them back to front. You would think that you were no good at maths and it was a complicated, difficult thing to do because they found it complicated. So you can't confuse the children. You can learn with them to an extent, but you need to have enough confidence that, say you're teaching knitting and the child drops their stitches and it all falls apart and they don't know where to go next and they're all twisted. You've got to be able to put those stitches back on the knitting needle for them and knit a row to get it straight again so that they can carry on. And you've got to be confident enough that you can be like, hey, it's going to be all right. We're doing this for fun. Let's explore. So learn a little bit for yourselves. And then model that you love it. If you show that you love it, that's more in the culture actually. If you show that you love it, they will love it. So if you're not confident with what you can do, then they're not going to be confident with what they can do. If you really can't do it, or some things, then get someone else to do it. You won't believe how many people will be willing to come into your class and teach it for free because they love it. And especially these crafts that are dying, if you contact your Weavers Guild or your Woodworkers Guild and say, hey, I really want to show this to my children, but I just don't know where to start, they'll be in. You'll be fighting them off. I have people coming all the time that aren't parents of my class, and they will be desperate. I've got someone that's heard about our paper piecing and wants to do some other kind of paper piecing I've never heard of and said, can I come in next Friday and show you this? It's not hard to find people to help you if you can't do it. So if you can't prepare yourself as an adult, find another prepared adult to help you out. And that might be in your school, pool your resources. I can't teach music. I can't. I'm never going to be able to. I've accepted that as my failing. But the teacher in the class next door is a fantastic musician who cannot do handwork. And so my children can drift into his class for music lessons and his children can drift into my class for handwork lessons. It works well. You just need to find out who is prepared for it. You also need to really prepare the parents. When my son was in preschool, we'd pick him up each day. Preschool was 3 to 6. We'd pick him up each day and say, what did you do today? And he'd say, pizza. And we knew he hadn't just eaten pizza for lunch every day, but that was the most significant thing to him. If your children are going home and saying to their parents, what did you do today? Handwork. Every day, then your parents are going to be like, what else are they doing in that class? But if they say, I inscribed a hexagon in a circle and then I had to copy it really accurately so that it would tessellate, and then I used it to sew scraps of fabric together to make a quilt in the same way that our ancestors did to meet their fundamental human needs for warmth, your parents are going to think that your children are learning something and they're going to be happy with that, and so are you.
That relates into the question, how do you manage kids who want to do handwork all day, and how do you alleviate parent anxiety, which you've just answered?
Yeah, so I was going to come back to okay, so yeah, children that want to do handwork all day, you have to ask why. Why do they want to do handwork all day, and why do you mind? If you mind because you think it's not productive work and they should be doing something else, well, why isn't it productive work? Is it that they're just finger knitting, in which case they're not being challenged? Is it that they don't know what else to do and need another lesson in something? Because if you're giving them lessons in all sorts of things and you are conferencing them with them regularly and making sure that they are inspired by all the other things you're doing, then they won't have time to do homework all day. But when children first come into my class, if they have come from a class that doesn't do very much handwork, then they binge. And that's because they have a need that needs to be fulfilled. They want to try all these exciting new things out. They want to feel the fluff, and they want to put things together, and they want to create. So it's fine for them to do that to a certain extent, and it does happen a bit in the first term, but then it fades out and they find their balance. And so you have to ask, if this child wanted to do maths all day, would I let them? Well, yeah, if they just discovered a concept and they were working through it and progressing and learning and excited by it, yeah, you'd let them until it ran its course. But if they were just taking the racks and tubes out every day and they were doing the same sums because really they didn't want to do anything else, or they were uncomfortable picking up something else, and it was busy work, then no, you would find another way. So I think as long as you are keeping an eye on it and making sure it's challenging and meaningful work, then it's not a problem if they're doing a lot of handwork, especially if you're tying it to the curriculum. And I will come on to that in the culture thing if we have time. There's so many ways you can tie it to the curriculum that you could say they're never doing handwork. They're only ever doing, the geometry of the inscribing the hexagon, the making the layers of the earth, even though they're making it in felt, the diorama that they've built to show how the Egyptians met some fundamental need. None of it needs to be considered handwork from a parent's perspective. All of it is just exploring those core curriculum concepts through craft. Was that both questions?
Yes, that's
yeah. Okay. It's also a good idea to tell the parents how much it's preparing the hands. We talk about preparing the hands for writing, which they do a lot lower down the school, but so many of these things that we are doing in handwork will actually improve their handwriting and their fine motor control and their crossing from their left brain to their right brain. If you think about spinning, I don't know how many of you actually can use a spindle, you have to imagine, but you have to twist it hard. With this motion here, you have to give it a good hard twist, and then you have to change your grip and really gently tease out the wool and keep it tight there. And then you have to twist it again and then change and really gently tease it out. But it's all this. And the same with needle felting. It's all this. So it's all practicing their pencil grip. It's all building their fine motor skills. And so even if it's not handwriting per se, you are preparing their hands. It is going to improve their writing. Okay, I'm going to skip quickly on to culture because I want to leave some time for questions. So in order for your handwork to be used and to be useful and actually helping your class culture, you need to build that class culture, especially if it's not something that people do as a matter of course. So I've already said model it. If you're doing handwork, if you're bringing in something that you've made at home or showing them your knitting, then the children are going to think it's a good thing to do. If it's not worth your time, it's not worth their time. So you need to show, even if you're not doing it at home, do it during community meetings so that your hands are moving and their hands are moving. We actually have times when it really is, it's not an expectation, they don't have to, but it is the norm to be doing your handwork. So like I said, during community meeting, before we start, we say, prepare yourself, bring whatever you need, and the children bring their knitting, their sewing. They can't then get up and go and get a new thread. So it's a lesson in being prepared themselves. When I read aloud to the children, I say, I'm going to read aloud in 5 minutes, get whatever you need to be ready, and they'll go off and get their knitting, their sewing, their spinning. And also, I talk about handwork bags now. Also, if they keep their handwork beside them while they're working, and then they run into something that they can't do, so they've got a material out, they've got stuck, I'm not available, instead of just sitting and chatting or giving up and putting it away, they just start doing their sewing or their knitting or their needle felting, whatever's in that. Actually, needle felting wouldn't be in that bag, but whatever's beside them. And then I can look up and go, oh, why have you got the stamp game out, but you've also got your handwork out? Must be you're stuck. So then I go over, and instead of going, oh, you're stuck on the stamp game, are you? First notice their handwork. First go, oh, cool, you've done an extra row, or this is really neat. Tell me about that. Oh, and now should we have a look at your maths? Did you want some help there? So it's really expected that they're always doing it.
We've had a few questions on project bags.
Yeah. Okay. So these are, this is Nina's project bag. You can see it says Nina on it. She made this in the 6 to 9 class, so she would have been probably 7 when she made it. And my ideal is for them to make them as soon as they come into the elementary, and that way they take these bags with them. So the assistant has pre-cut these because they are for the younger children. I get the children to do it themselves if they need to make their own, and she gives them one coloured back piece and one piece of calico for the front, and she overlocks them. If you haven't got an overlocker, then use pinking shears, but she just runs them all through the overlocker to make it easy for the children to sew. And I will just take out whatever's in here, her spindle and her spinning, to show you the inside. So Nina's hand sewn these two pieces together, and it would have taken a long time, and it's really, really sweet, really neat stitching, and you can see it's overlocked there to stop it falling apart. So she's handmade this little drawstring bag, really, really simple, but before she sewed it together with an embroidery hoop, she wrote her name with a pencil, and she just stitched in coloured thread. It doesn't have to be fancy stitches. I think she's got a chain stitch there, but it's mostly back stitch. And she's put her name on it, and so she's super proud of this now. So this sits beside her while she's working, and then when she needs her handwork, it's all there ready for her, prepared, and it's nice and neat and tidy. My rule is one handwork at a time, because like with these hexagons, everybody wants to do them, and so then they'll drop whatever they were doing previously half done, because suddenly there's a new exciting thing. And so I'll be like, yeah, that's really cool, you can do this hexagon work, but you do need to finish that project off first. It'll still be here, because otherwise we get all these half full spindles and knitting projects that have started and not finished. So one handwork at a time generally. That doesn't include the collective projects we're working on as a class, and that's part of building your culture as well. Is excuse me, is working on collective projects. That could be something you need for the class. It could be you need napkins for your community lunch, so you all sew them. We're working on a timeline of life at the moment. I'm really excited about this. The children have laid out the whole blank timeline and copied it onto calico, and they are embroidering the red lines in all different embroidery stitches, one stitch per line, and they've hand pieced together all the coloured bars at the top, and then they're needle felting, sewing and crocheting all the individual pieces onto little poppers to go on, and then anything that they want to put on the timeline that doesn't actually fit on our timeline, they're researching where it would go and then making a little information card to go with it. So we're going to have this amazing class timeline that everybody's feeding into. So this is part of the tying it to the curriculum. You know, if you're making the timeline of life, yeah, you're doing handwork, but you're learning so much more. And you know, the child that, yeah, they spent all day needle felting, well, this is what they made when they spent all day needle felting. And just like we coloured our charts and timelines ourselves so we know them really well, this child is fully going to remember exactly what this means. And then, oh, I really want to show you this. Okay, so this isn't finished. I just borrowed it. It's a work in progress. I just went around my class this week to see what I could borrow to show you. So it just says L on the front because it's going to say line. She's just appliqued it on. And the first page is blank as well because it's going to say Phoebe's Book of Lines or something. So first page blank. Okay. So on the first page, we've got our little people in our sleeping bags. We'll come back to them. Can you see that? Yeah. And it says straight line. Curved line. Broken line. Convergent. You know what I'm going to do now, don't you? We're so happy. We're on our way to meet. We're so sad. We're never going to see each other again. We're not happy or sad. We're just happy on our own little lines. Isn't that cool? So, you know, when parents are saying handwork all the time, this child's never going to forget those geometry concepts. I've got another one doing one with the yellow area material where they have the main bit secured, and then they, you know, like with the triangles, they're going to flip the piece off and turn it around and put it onto a button. So yeah, I mean, handwork goes all the way across the curriculum. There's so many ways that you can incorporate it. When we're dyeing, we're also doing ratios, proportions, science, you know, looking at the pH, looking at the effects of different mordants and sunlight, and setting up all kinds of experiments. I am very conscious that we've gone up to an hour. I could keep talking forever. feel free to go to bed if that's what you need to do. I'll just say a few more things and then see if there are any urgent questions. Okay. This is when I asked my friend who does webinars for any tips. She said the most important thing is start and finish on time, and I haven't managed that one, so sorry, you don't have to stay. But I did want to say about the culture a little bit more. Yeah, one of the most important things for making handwork work in the classroom and having a culture of it is to budget for it. If you're feeling really tight and stingy with your materials because you know you haven't got very many and you've gone over your budget, then you're not going to feel happy about children using them, and you're going to be upset when someone cuts a circle out of the middle of a piece of felt and ruins it or whatever. You have to accept it is going to cost you some of your money. It really doesn't cost very much. Like I said, I don't buy wool, I don't buy fabric, I do buy roving, I do buy some felt, I do buy bits and pieces. You know, I have to replace knitting needles every now and again, but you can get them from secondhand shops. But do be aware that there is a cost to it, and you just need to factor that in, just like you factor in your cubing material and your fraction insets that get chipped and have to be replaced every few years. You know, you need to find a way to make sure you have enough. Like with your felting needles, they break. You have to replace those, and if a child runs out of felting needles right in the middle of their project, that's really frustrating. So you have to make sure you have enough there. So it's always like, yes, we have plenty of handwork supplies because handwork is important. You can use handwork to build your community. I think I started to say that before, and I was just thinking of some examples of that, of the older children working with the younger children. So that child you were talking about that does handwork all the time, the child that will just sit and knit and knit and knit, you need to connect them with the young child who's really struggling with knitting. And chances are, if they're struggling with knitting, then they're probably struggling with other things as well. So they really actually do need that connection. And so I would go to my older child and I'd say, hey, I've noticed you've done loads of really good knitting and you're coming along really well. I think you're ready for an apprentice. And then you can take them and introduce them to this younger child who's struggling, and you agree they're going to do a project together. And the way that works is, I mean, you can do it with other things too, but we'll talk about it. The way that works is you knit a row, the apprentice knits a row. And so the lead knitter can cast on for them, and then the apprentice can knit a row, and then they pass it back to the lead knitter. And when they pass it back, one stitch is too tight, one's too loose, two are crossed over, and one's dropped. And so that second row is going to be really, really hard for that poor child who's just fought their way through a row to knit. And so they pass it to their experienced knitter, and then they knit a row, and it comes back to your new knitter with this perfect row of even stitches, so the new child can succeed again. And you pass it back and forth. In the meantime, the experienced knitter is modelling their own knitting. They're having a lovely time because they get to do it, and they're helping this other child and making sure that every time they do a new row, they're able to succeed. So if you start apprenticing them and getting the older to teach the younger, you should find that actually it connects them through your class as well. Celebrate handwork heroes. We're all about heroes in the I know we're not all 6 to 12, but in the 6 to 12 we're all about heroes, and there are so many handwork heroes. I've got lots of books where I read stories about people that do great handwork, the groat and the rug, the magic and the weaving. I'm not going to list all the books. You can find them. Maybe I'll do a blog post about it. Shrek, the sheep that escaped. The children all love the escapee sheep who ran away and refused to be sheared for 6 years and then had the longest hair in history. Learn about him. Learn about the people who've solved problems through handwork. Learn about the people who want to make the world a better place by bombing with yarn to make everyone smile. The little girl who started the Peggy Square movement to use up, she was 4, to use up scraps of wool, maybe 5, and knit blankets for children during the Depression. There are so many heroes you can tell stories of, and that's when they start doing this stuff where they will want to join a movement and sew bat wraps or knit for preemie babies. So make it something that we all celebrate. How are you doing with questions? Do you want to hop onto some of those?
There's so many of them. We're not going to get through them all.
Do you think we should do it as a separate block?
Yeah, possibly.
Are there enough for that?
Yeah, there's more than enough.
Okay.
Let's do a few now.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you let the children take their handwork home with them to finish off? We've had that a few times.
That's really tricky because they're really excited about their work, and it comes to the end of the day and we're all about follow the child, don't interrupt their work, let them carry on. But then they take it home, they've taken the class materials, the ball of wool that you've just given them to, ball of yarn that you've just given them to work with, and they either use it all up and you're basically providing their home with all their supplies as well, or they don't bring it back and then they haven't got handwork to work on the next day. So generally no. Generally I try and get excited with them about a project they could start at home. If they're children that I know, we're in a fairly well-off school, it's not an issue for us. But I think if I was in a school where the children would struggle to find materials at home, then it would be a different story. But as much as possible, I try and say, well, this is your school handwork, what could you start at home? And try and keep it here.
Any ideas or suggestions for materials or projects during the COVID-19 when kids are at home?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? It's really hard because you don't know what children have got, and even upcycling projects, you kind of need to know what they have to upcycle. So I did post on my blog last week or the week before, weaving with a cardboard loom, because most people have cardboard and most people can get hold of yarn. Yeah, I think I need to have a look and make a list and maybe do a blog post on that, because it's really tricky to come up with things that everybody can do without much adult input.
Do you insist on projects being finished?
Not always, and it depends what finished is. That quiet book that I just showed you, that's been going for a really long time on and off, because she kind of hit a sticking point and she didn't know how to put it together in a book but wanted to figure it out herself. So it came out and went away a lot, and so she did put it away and do other projects in between. And so you need to get it to a level of finished. Often it'll get passed on, another child will take it on or will help you find a way to finish it, but it depends on the child. If they're just starting everything, then that's not going to work. But also I don't want them to never be able to start something new because they can't bring themselves to finish a project that they've started. So at some stage you might just have to write some things off.
How do you keep them interested?
I don't know, I haven't struggled with that. Keeping them interested in handwork is, yeah, like if there is a project that tails off, you might just need to write it off, or you might need to sit beside them and work on them with it a bit, work on it a bit, or apprentice it, or get somebody else doing the same sort of work so that they can pick it up again, get a friend involved, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, it's a tricky one. Depends on the child.
What handwork would you recommend for 3 to 6 classroom?
That's a big question too, and kind of, I guess that's a separate webinar as well. Of the stuff that I've written with wool, they can certainly do felting. In fact, our 3 to 6 teachers, they use my lessons, and they do wet felting where they make felt balls, felt pictures. They have a spindle strung up, so they don't actually spin the bit I was talking about drafting it, but they just have a spindle dangling on a piece of yarn, and the children just literally practice the spinning motion and spin it and stop it, so they can practice that motion and prepare their hand without having to spin the wool. They also have a big loom set up outside where they do a collective project, and they do weaving. They even do a little bit of solar dyeing in jars outside. Like, most of the stuff we do in 9 to 12 can be begun in 3 to 6. Lots of sewing, lots of clay. Should we, one more?
One more. How do you fund all of this and find all the materials? That's been asked quite a few times.
Yeah.
Do you use non-natural fibres?
Well, for spinning I only use natural fibres, but for knitting I use whatever I can get. Acrylic's cheap, it's easy. Yeah, so whatever's donated, but a lot of fabric is donated. But yeah, we have an area of our budget. It's not very much. I think on materials, I spend less than $100 a year for my 28 children. So it's not a huge amount, and that's if I splurge. I could do it a lot less. But if I I bought some of the fabric new for the hexagons just for fun, because I wanted some bright colours. But generally, it doesn't cost that much. But the spinning wheel costs a bit. It was under $100 because I'm in New Zealand. But you only buy it once. Like a spinning wheel, literally, they're antiques. They last forever. So if you're prepared to spend money on your other materials, then spend money on a loom and a spinning wheel. But yeah, you need to talk to your administrators about budgeting for it, and then put it out to your community. Ask for donations from your local guild. Okay.
One more. Can you do that niddy noddy rhyme again?
Can I do the niddy noddy? That's in the lesson as well, and I've jammed it, trying to show you how easily it comes apart. I've jammed it. So you're winding it around here, and it goes up and down, and then when you take it off, you've got this whole big loop. So you're counting, you measure your niddy noddy, measure how long it is round, and then you go niddy noddy, 2 heads, 1 body. It's really hard to do without the yarn. 'Tis one, tain't one, till 'twill be 2 soon. And that takes you 1 full round. So then you go, 'tis 2, tain't 2, 'twill be 2 soon. 'Tis 3, tain't 3, 'twill be 3 soon. I think you can probably get the pattern. And then you have to tie it into bundles and take it off and wash it. Okay, so I am going to stop. I'm sorry that I have gone over time. I have so much more I want to say. I need to look at how to do this again. I hope it has been useful. Please join Montessori Handwork Threads Facebook group if you would like to talk about this stuff some more. It's a really cool group where people have lots of knowledge and ideas. Ask your questions, share your ideas. If you would like to buy the work of wool, it's on montessorihandwork.com. If you use the code webinar, all capitals webinar today, you'll get $10 off. While stocks last, because I'm coming to the end of a print run, so I hope this will work. But yeah, use the code webinar today and you'll get $10 off. If you do buy one, I need to put it up on the website. If you do buy one, please be aware that our postage system has gone really slow because of COVID. Our infrastructure is not coping that well, so they are taking a while to arrive, and we have no tracking system in New Zealand, so you can't keep watch and know when it's coming. So it's a little bit of a wait. They are arriving, but they are taking much longer than we would normally expect them to. But I'm hoping people can get them during lockdown, because this really is the time that handwork is the thing. So I'm also on Montessori Handwork on Facebook page, and I post pictures on Instagram. I've just started that again now that we are back. So I hope this is useful. If you would like to do this again, let me know, and let me know what you would like me to do. Any feedback, very welcome. As I say, this is my first webinar. So I'm definitely open to feedback. James has a question.
Just remind it's going to be
remind you to upload the video. Yes, I don't know how to do that yet, but when I do know how to do it, it will be on my website. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Happy handwork. Bye bye.